We respond one way to positive images, and we respond another way to negative images. I can ask you to respond to items about an image to get an idea of how you feel and quantify that. This image makes me happy. Strongly disagree to strongly agree. This image makes me happy. Strongly disagree to strongly agree. This image makes me happy. Strongly disagree, strongly agree. But if I keep providing you only positive images, it seems to be providing only one side of the construct that we're trying to measure. It seems that we're missing out on that negative aspect that we all have to deal with in life. And whatever we're trying to quantify here would be upwardly biased by this presentation of only positive imagery. This image makes me happy. Strongly disagree, strongly agree. So it makes sense that we would want to include a mix of both negative and positive images to get a more balanced picture of your disposition or attitude of whatever we're trying to measure. This image makes me happy. Strongly disagree, strongly agree. With the negative images mixed in with the positive images, we get this more balanced quantitative measure. This image makes me happy. Strongly disagree, strongly agree. This image makes me happy. Strongly disagree, strongly agree. And we could take this same idea of balancing both positive and negative ideas to the construct of usability. This software is easy to use. Strongly disagree, strongly agree. I find this software difficult to use. Strongly disagree, strongly agree. And by providing this mix of both positive and negative items, we provide a more balanced picture of usability. We're not predisposing our users to give us a positive response. And in also so doing this, we eliminate the possibility, reduce the possibility of biases. Two types specifically are called acquiescent and extreme response biases. I have a scan here of a questionnaire that a user responded to, and as you can see, they somewhat haphazardly circled the most favorable response for each of these items. And in fact, in one, they didn't even fully circle the 5 there. Well, this is an example of an extreme response tendency going on here. They picked the most favorable response. An acquiescent bias is where users have the tendency just to agree to whatever statements we have. So it would seem that providing this mix of both positive and negatives would reduce these biases that we think happen from users having to respond to these items, and therefore would provide us a better measure of usability because there's less of these errors and less of these biases in our metrics. And this is in fact what the most popular questionnaires of usability also do. They build on a tradition that's been going on for at least 60 years in questionnaire development. In fact, it's almost something that we take for granted. You could say it's questionnaire design 101, that you should provide a mix of both positive and negative items in questionnaires, because it seems so intuitive that we would respond differently to these items, and having that balance would both reduce these biases and provide a more balanced picture of our attitudes towards usability. One notable exception to this is the all-positive post-study system usability questionnaire. It's also called the computer system usability questionnaire. It was developed by Jim Lewis at the same time that these other questionnaires were being developed. But it contained an all-positive version. His rationale was that, coming from a human factors background, the burden it placed upon the user to have to alternate their items would probably outweigh whatever benefit that we got from alternating these items. But in so doing and in publishing results, he received a hailstorm of criticism for ignoring this most fundamental of questionnaire practices of not alternating items. But we wanted to know how much of a problem were these biases and the problem of overly biasing users to respond positively. And there was no data that existed in the usability literature. So what we wanted to do was find out, to the extent that these extreme response biases exist, how bad they were, and what the consequences were of including only positive items. And so we looked at the most popular questionnaire for measuring usability, the System Usability Scale. It's been cited in over 600 publications. It includes the same number of both positively worded items, which are the odd items, and negatively phrased items, which are the even items, and they alternate through. We created an all-positive system usability scale by creating close analogs to the negative items. So for example, items 2 and 8 go from negative to positive, and we create an all positive version of the sus. We then had users attempt 2 representative tasks across mostly third-party automotive websites and financial services websites in a remote unmoderated usability test. We had 213 users attempt these tasks, and then at the end they were randomly assigned either the original system usability scale or the all positive system usability scale. And first and foremost, we wanted to see, well, would we have reached a different conclusion? Was there an overall difference in scores for the overall sus score and for the even and the odd items, the ones that we did manipulate and the ones that we didn't manipulate? And would we see a difference in those biases? Well, to our surprise, we in fact saw no difference in the scores. After a little over 100 users in each group and across those websites, we found the average score were statistically indistinguishable. You could see here these are the 95% confidence interval, these yellow bars, and the strong overlap shows that there's no significant difference. Somewhat surprisingly too, in fact, the positive sus is tending lower than the normal sus, and we expected this to actually have a slightly inflated score. We also saw no difference for the even and odd items. They were within 1/10 of a point of each other, and again you can see the confidence intervals have a strong overlap, showing no significant difference between the original or normal sus and the all positive version of the sus. We also saw no difference in that acquiescent bias between users, between the normal and the positive sus. Again, strong overlap. And there was also no difference in the extreme responders, those picking either the all 5s or all 1s in this case. And in fact, again, even though they are statistically indistinguishable, as you can see with the yellow confidence interval bars here, the actual positive sus actually showed fewer extreme response tendencies than the normal sus, somewhat surprisingly. So is it a wash? Did we basically see there's no problem with alternating or not alternating, that you could do either one? Or is there a hidden cost to doing this? Is there a dark side to alternating those items? And we in fact looked at what we call the 3 M's of the dark side of alternating. That is, users might actually misinterpret the negatively phrased items or respond to them differently than they do, and that would provide a distorted picture. Or they understand them, but then when they're going to respond, accidentally agree to the negative items when they meant to disagree. They always have to remember to reverse the scale. And then finally, researchers forgetting to alternate the items back, they would have to recode the even items so they point in the same direction as the odd ones. Well, we found of the 107 standard sus questionnaires, the original sus, that 17% contained users who agreed to 3 or more positive and negative items. They were in a sense saying that the website was both easy to use and difficult to use. Now, these were either mistakes or misinterpretation, or they actually felt that way, but it certainly struck us as inconsistent to having so much, and we suspect a good portion of that 17% contains either mistakes or misinterpretations. And we even eliminated users who might have not been paying attention by providing within that subset of questions one item that said, please pick the response option 3. And some users who were just racing through to collect the honorarium were eliminated, in this case about 5%. And surprisingly, for miscoding, it would seem that it would be an intuitive thing to do with software, but if you forget to recode the even items, you can still get reasonable sus scores, and it's impossible to tell the difference without actually seeing the raw sus scores. And we found over the years of data sets that we've collected and have been donated to us that 3 of the 27, or 11%, were actually miscoded by the researchers. They forgot to reverse the even items and reported a score that was different than the raw items would have suggested. An additional disadvantage that we've uncovered, both discussed in the literature and that we saw, is a distortion of the factor structure. When you want to understand what the questionnaire is measuring, you do a procedure called factor analysis. It's a multivariate technique, where you could see in some cases that a questionnaire is measuring the construct of usability and learnability. Well, with negatively and positively phrased items, what happens is negative items tend to load on one factor and positive items tend to load on another factor. And this would be like if you were to administer an IQ test and instead of seeing a verbal ability and a mathematical ability, you saw a positively worded item ability and a negatively worded item ability. Now, while that's interesting, it's not what we're essentially trying to measure both in IQ tests and in usability questionnaires. So we do react differently to negative images and positive images. We likely react differently to negative and positive items as well. But whatever benefit we get from trying to provide that balance in these questionnaires, we're finding is outweighed by the clear mistakes, the 3 M's that you get from miscoding, mistaking, or then researchers forgetting to reverse the responses. So this result certainly applies to the SUS questionnaire applied in remote unmoderated test for websites, and we suspect for all applications. Future research would reveal whether or not this results applies when users are more closely monitored, say in a lab-based setting. So what's one to conclude from this? Well, we're saying it's okay to continue using the system usability scale. It's the most popular questionnaire. It's short. It does a good job. It has good internal reliability. Just double check your item codings in some way. And if possible, have a way that users can check or verify that they intended to respond the way they did. If you're generating a new questionnaire, it's okay to be all positive. Whatever benefit you might get from alternating items or including negative items in there are likely outweighed by the negative consequences. And so keep in mind, those extreme responders are going to exist, those acquiescent people. People are going to still pick the all fives and rush through it. But if we went through the trouble of alternating this questionnaires, as in this example, those people who were maybe going through quickly and picking the highest response, instead of generating a very favorable response, all fives, we would have got a more neutral response, some basically mix of all fives and all ones. And this would clearly have been different than a very positive sentiment we see here. It would have led us to believe that this user had an average sentiment. So these biases, they do exist, but again, are outweighed by the negatives.